Preventing a hostile work environment with Brett Lovett. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact dependent. Hey everyone, this is Mac Pierre Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brett Lovett. I'm harassmentcompliancetraining.com, and I'm out here in California, and glad to be here on the show with you, Mac.
Awesome. So, Brett, we are talking now about a topic that you're always talking about, of course, which is what you do, which is you train businesses and companies or organizations about how to deal with how to stay in compliance with harassment rules, laws, and regs, and to make sure that their businesses are profitable without having the distractions of people filing claims against each other. So whenever people go to their job and they have to sit through these corporate, trainings where they're told, hey, keep your hands to yourself. You're that guy. You're the one who goes around and does the trainings. So you're going to be talking to us today about how to prevent a hostile work environment, and specifically in light of a presentation that you're going to be giving on that topic. And help me make sure I remember correctly, at the Riverside County Library System on October 16th, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So Palm Desert branch is part of that system, and that's where I'll be giving this particular presentation. And just to piggyback off of what you were saying, yes, I'm that guy that comes in. Now think about this: when you go to when you see your colleagues, Mac, and when most people come into the workplace and see their colleagues, it's generally, "Hi, Mac, how you doing? Good to see you. How was your day?" But whenever Brett comes in to the scene, most people aren't that excited to see me because I'm that guy that you talked about. That's that hostile work environment, sexual harassment guy. What's he going to say? I'm not sure how I feel about this subject. So I'm always having to overcome that hurdle or that obstacle up front so that I can try and reach people with the information. So there's a little bit of bias there that I have to initially overcome, no matter who it is, whether I'm talking to the public, whether I'm talking to attorneys or physicians or people in the education and academia. I have to overcome that. So actually, I was glad that you mentioned that because part of my presentation is just to connect with people first, and then if I can get them to open up the ideas, then I can start the laying the foundation for some thoughts and some ideas that I want them to consider.
Yes. And so before we get into those uh, before we get into some of those ideas that you're going to be talking about today, I wanted to remind people that Brett's not a stranger here. You've been on the podcast many times. And so one of the things you love to do is to share about relationships, not just in the family, but to share about corporate relationships and to share about employee employer relationships. And so the whole harassment compliance thing, I think, really connects back to how to help people stay in proper relationships with proper boundaries so that they can be successful and personally or in the business space, right?
That's absolutely right. I think for me personally, I'm not dogmatic about this. This is just an approach that I use to see if it resonates with people. But I allow people to form their own conclusions, and I want them to form their own conclusions. But to think that we can be, the person that we are at home or out in public, and to think that that automatically, in totality, translates into the workplace is, I think, where people get tripped up a little bit, Mac. There are some things in the workplace that may not be necessarily appropriate, that may be appropriate, in our personal life. And so I think it's just kind of, Socrates said this 2,000 years ago, or no, maybe it was Plato, and he probably ripped it off from some scriptural thing. I doubt he came up with this on his own. But to paraphrase, he essentially said, adults are sophisticated, and they don't need to be instructed as much as they just need to be reminded. I do like that quote because it dignifies people, Mac. And in all, with all due respect, there are some people that do need to be instructed, but we still dignify them, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to lay out information and I try to say, this is stuff that we inherently know. And I think it's good for us to refresh and talk about it. And then it kind of gives us that redirection, right? You know, a boat that leaves or a ship that leaves harbor and goes from Los Angeles to London doesn't go in a straight line. You know, it tacks left, it tacks right until it reaches its destination. We're no different. Sometimes we need to tack a little bit left and tack, or tack a little bit right and then left, and then we will reach our destination. So it's something that we need to do. And that's kind of how I look at the information that I share. It's helping people tack left and right and adjust and just understand, hey, maybe there's some things in the home that I can't necessarily do straight away in the workplace. Doesn't
Yep.
mean anything that you're bad, or it's just understanding what's appropriate where.
Got it. Okay. So if a person wants to learn more, they can go see you in person live. I've gotten a chance to meet you in person live, and so it's great to be able to talk to you. Um, October 16th, 7 p.m. at the and I'll show the flyer back up. This is going to be at the Palm Desert Library Community Room. So folks out in California, Southern California especially, or Palm Springs, California, you can make your way out there. But Brett, give us a little preview. Let's talk about the key to helping people prevent a hostile work environment before they ever get one. Okay, so for the employer or business owner who's out there, who's watching this, what are some points you can give us? And I'll start off by reading this on the flyer. The one key to a safe and thriving workplace or educational environment by preventing hostile work environments, so sexual harassment, abusive conduct, and bullying in the workplace and in our educational systems. So tell us a few of the points, and let me continue with the topics covered. So, what are the differences between hostile work environment, sexual harassment, abusive conduct, and bullying? And go at it. What would you say to people, and why should they come and hear more in depth information from you?
Thank you for that. I've been doing this 15 years. When I first started out doing these programs, I was doing them in much the way, actually, they are still done, because they're predominantly done by attorneys of counsel, maybe in an organization. Occasionally, you know, internal HR departments may have somebody trained up or certified to deliver the programs. Most of them are legal professionals. I'll just put it that way. And with legal professionals, and I know you can appreciate this. You know, I have a background. You're an active attorney. Uh, Legal professionals can be very legalistic, very narrow, and very rigid in their understanding or application of something. They can be acutely accurate, but that within acute accuracy can also be rigidity. And that's just kind of how the law is set up. So, you know, doing these programs and teaching people legalistic jargon, do's and don'ts, yes and no's. I saw when I looked at those numbers, you know, the EEOC is the federal body that tracks complaints. Those are the complaints that we know about, Mac. How many complaints are never filed, right, with the EEOC? So we just kind of guess it's double whatever it is. So if there's 50,000 complaints filed last year, then it's more likely there was 100,000 complaint. You know, there's 100,000 incidents, we'll call them. So I looked at these numbers over the years, and I'm thinking, okay, I would see sometimes a leveling off, but sometimes even a ticking up. And I'm saying we're doing more training than we've ever done before on this subject, especially in the last 7 years.
Yep.
And there was a leveling off or up, but there was never a downturn. And I thought, how are we doing all this training and we're still at the same level or going up in some years? So I thought, I don't think, I think it's us. I don't think we all need to learn, but I think it's what the material that we're delivering and how we're delivering it. So I decided to go back to the drawing board with some colleagues and redesign something that I think it's relational based. And I appreciated that you said that at the beginning too. The answer is in relational based understanding. I'll explain more of what that means in the actual program that I give. Okay. But it's a when I say the one key, that one key is a relational based understanding. And I will highlight what that is in the program and how they can apply that. Okay. So I don't want to give away the answer for what it is until the program, but I will tell you this: it's a relational based understanding, because the training before wasn't relational based, it's legal based. And I don't think people learn from that. I think they need to consider things that are relational, and they need to look at themselves and how they're applying this to their colleagues, and even at home. Even it's not just in the workplace, it's also, how we are at home.
Yeah.
And so
Brett,
that's where the emphasis is.
let me interject. This relational based understanding. Would you say that this applies to any kind of business setup, whether it's a blue collar work or something that's being done in the educational system?
Absolutely. It's across the board, because it doesn't matter. Complaints don't come from just one sector. I mean, this is, education, government, business. It's across the board. It's wherever somebody, here's where it applies, Mac. Wherever someone is engaging in an environment with someone else. Anytime you have that dynamic, this applies.
So conflict happens everywhere, and your focus is start looking at these things from relational perspective, not just a legal perspective. Uh, because I'm guessing, what if you hammer somebody over the head with the law, that doesn't necessarily change their behavior. However, if you get them to understand why they shouldn't be doing something and why it's the respectful thing to do, then that might actually change the behavior. Is that basically, because I know you talked about
Yeah,
respect before as a
yeah,
key ingredient of all of this?
yeah. That's really well said, and you really just, you hit the nail on the head right there, and I appreciate that. So it's relational based. That's what I mean by relational based, and it's essentially the thought of principles versus the law. The law is good, and we're not putting down the law. What we're saying, Mac, is that the law doesn't teach you to think. It just draws a line and says, "Don't cross this line." Whereas principles teach you, there's a lot of space there for application. And so they cause you to think. Now, I can go do this thing and I can say this thing and I'm not breaking the law, but is it in the best interest of this relationship if I do say this, if I do this thing? That's where I think the answer is. And that's what the program emphasizes.
Got it. So um, you hit on not just hostile work environment, but of course sexual harassment, and you've laid it out before like as an umbrella, and you try to give people a framework to understand these different types of things. Because I'll be honest, not working in that field like you do, sometimes it kind of all blurs to me. Can you break it down again and give us the forest for the trees
Okay.
perspective?
Yeah, and I appreciate you highlighting that too. I think most people do their work, right? So they don't they're not trying to figure out, okay, what does the law say, and how does it how does it differentiate between these terms? So here's how I usually instruct, or how I usually lay out what it means, because most people will use hostile work environment or discrimination or sexual harassment or bullying. They'll kind of combine them all as one. When they're referring to them, the general rule or law is hostile work environment. And so I tell people, look at hostile work environment as an umbrella. Okay? Everything, every complaint that can be filed comes underneath that umbrella. The number one complaint filed underneath hostile work environment is sexual harassment. But you have retaliation, you have discrimination, so they all come underneath that umbrella. If somebody's engaged in sexual harassment, they're creating a hostile work environment. If somebody's engaged in abusive conduct, they're creating a hostile work environment. So hostile work environment, again, the umbrella. Everything else falls underneath that. Just for everybody's knowledge, sexual harassment is the number one complaint filed underneath that law or that rule. Did I explain that
Yes.
one?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to start wrapping it up, give us one, I guess. I like examples. I like stories. I kind of wanted like a teaser to help somebody, consider, hey, you know what? Let me go and hear more in depth about this. How do I prevent a hostile work environment? What is something that's commonly routine that people who are listening might know, hey, I've seen that happen, or that was alleged against me, or I don't want my business to ever go down that road, what would be an example you would give to somebody to actually think through, hey, you know what, you don't want that to happen to you, so you should come and listen?
Okay, great. I'm going to see if I can actually squeeze in two here.
Sure.
Um, Here's the most common thing in my experience that I see. I think most people think about hostile work environment and or sexual harassment, and they think about it in terms of like overt, what I'll call overt acts, like somebody would come in and grab somebody aggressively, right, or in an over sexualized manner. That actually doesn't happen that much. That overt, egregious, um, indisputable action. It happens, but it's much rarer. What happens more often than not, what's 80, 85, 88% of the actual claims that we can see or that I see is gray area. Gray area matters where people when they're called out on it or they find themselves in a formal complaint will say, well, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to say that. Well, I didn't really realize I wasn't supposed to do that. Or this is how I grew up, and I grew up with five brothers, and this was okay. There's that translation I was talking about from home environment to the workplace,
Yeah.
because you're throwing in all these people with different dispositions and different backgrounds and different just differences. And so when you throw all those together, you're going to have sometimes some crossover, some things that aren't appropriate. So we're just trying to help with that. We're not trying to pin somebody down and say you're a bad person. We're just saying, hey, maybe you need to adjust a little bit here. So to answer your question, or to give you an example, there's one example of it's generally gray area stuff where I see 80, 85% of the complaints. Okay.
Got it.
You can still have the seriousness of it. And we can talk, and I talk about that in the program, how that relates to once you're in a matter. Here's a second quick story. I went into an organization. They had 50 people there, aerospace here, 8 area company in Southern California. And there was an older gentleman, looked like he was towards his retirement, getting ready to take retirement. He was in the back row when I walked in the morning. He was kind of sitting with his arm, he had a stern look and his arms crossed. And I was like, because I look at the individuals that are in there, I'm like, okay, I think he doesn't want to be here. But I go through the whole program. He never moved from that position. Okay, so about 15 minutes before I'm about ready to wrap it up, I must have signaled somehow I was about ready to wrap it up. And he raised his hand, and I thought, oh no, okay, here we go. And he's like, okay, look, I'm going to retire in 8 months. And he goes, I'm really glad because I'm tired of you guys. And he points his finger at me, coming in here every 2 years, telling us what we can say and what we can't say, what we can do and what we can't do. And I thought he didn't listen to the last hour and 40 minutes because that's the last thing I do. I don't go in and tell anybody what to do. And you know this, Mac, because you've seen me deliver this. So I thought, man, he was already preset in this understanding. So I thought for a second, how do I help him? And in the moment, I just thought this. I just said, you've been here for 50 years. If you looked at the room 50 years ago, it was probably predominantly white, predominantly male, and maybe a couple, maybe females that were probably just secretaries. I said, look at the room now. You have every race and nationality represented. It's half male, half female. I said, the reason why we come in here isn't to say do this and don't do that. It's that the world is more complex and that the issues in the workplace are more diversified because of the dynamic makeup of the workplace now. That was my best way to answer that. But if people are thinking, hey, why would I attend this? It's because I want to talk to you about gray areas, and I also want to tell you what's the real reason for it. Things are more complex and more diversified. So let's come and talk about it a little bit. That's the thrust of the program.
Awesome. Sounds good. So definitely if I own a business and I want to keep my business's nose clean, I don't want to have any kind of complaints, even in the gray areas I might never predict, I'd want to go and check out your presentation. So again, that's going to be Monday, October 16th, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at the Palm Desert Library Community Room. And that's part of the Riverside County Library System, Southern California. And hopefully people can check it out and learn a thing or two. All right. Thanks so much, Brett. We will talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Mac.
And by the way, your website, of course, is under your name, which is harassmentcompliancetraining.com.
That's
It's a
right.
mouthful, but people can learn more about you and contact you directly if they wanted to there. All right.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Until next time, thanks so much for watching and listening to the LMI podcast, Lawyers Meteors International channel. Until next time, bye bye.